And then the form of it, the form of the initiative. It has to have a title, it has to have a summary, it has to have a preamble. And then you have to have a reason for the initiative. And you have to explain why. And it has to have a complete text. This is boilerplate in any legislative body, but we have to have that kind of detail if we're going to have a proper initiative. And then the content of the initiative, it shall pertain to a matter of public policy. It can't be any harebrained idea that anybody has. It has to be relevant to the government of relevant jurisdiction. You know, if it's a federal matter, it has to be for federal. If it's for a local city, it has to be for a local city matter. You can't have federal stuff being put forth at the city level. These are basic, ordinary things that have to be thought of and put here in specific language. The title and summary shall be subject to the approval of the Electoral Trust. Now, most states right now, they're the ones that write the title and summary, and I found from actual experience that's how they sabotage the will of the people. And on 2 occasions I've had to go to court to get the bureaucrats to write exactly what the initiative is supposed to say, because they were twisting it to make sure that they sabotage the initiative. So we let the sponsors write what the subject is, and we let the Electoral Trust read it and look at it and make sure that they're not playing games with the title and the summary. Now the next is a subject. It should only be one subject. In the Congress, when I served, we used to have Christmas tree bills. And that is, you put up a piece of legislation and everybody puts up every kind of subject. Here, you got an appropriations bill for military appropriations. Well, they'll put on a bill for school prayer. They'll put on an amendment for abortion. They'll put on an amendment for God knows what. And that's called a Christmas tree bill, because they know this legislation is going to pass and they try to load it up. Well, that's not a proper way to legislate, but they do it in every legislative body. But you're not going to do that kind of silliness when the people are legislating, so it's going to have only one subject. And now, a word limit. It's going to have a limit of 5,000 words. If you can't explain one subject in 5,000 words, I got to tell you, there's game playing going on. And of course, you have initiatives in the 24 states where they've had so many words that nobody reads it. And that, of course, is a kind of a way to obfuscate and fool the people with phony initiatives, and they do this in Congress with legislation. Here, bills. The Patriot Act was over 300 pages, and it was put on the desk of members of Congress the day before they voted on it. Do you mean to tell me that the Congress read the Patriot Act before they voted on it? Of course not. And I'll tell you, 95% of what the members vote on in Congress, they have not read. 95% of the Congress vote on legislation they have not read. Part of it is because they don't have the time, and part of it is because it's a committee system. And I'll go into that as we proceed into this. Now, the next section we have are qualifications. And that, of course, is now, this is very key, because people have to ask, well, how do you qualify an initiative to be presented to the people? Now, in a legislative body, like in my case when I was in the Senate, the fact that I got elected to the Senate qualified me to introduce legislation. Now, the fact that I introduced it, that qualifies me to put forth a bill. Doesn't mean the bill will be passed. It has to go to committee and be voted on by the body, the Senate, and then the House, and then both together. But what qualifies an initiative put forth by a group of people to then be voted by all the American people or by all the people in the state? Well, there's 3 ways of doing it. There normally is 2 ways in most of the states. One way is by petition. People go out and get enough signatures to be able to determine, are there enough people that think that this is a serious enough subject that it should be presented to the balance of the people in a relevant constituency. And the states, here again, it's representative government, that set up a percentage of signatures that you should get. And then they play games. Oh, that the people who collect the signatures have to be citizens, or you can only pay them so much, or you can't use other signature gatherers from other states. It's very, very convoluted, and it's a silly game that's played to make it difficult for people to qualify initiatives. In California, it takes about $1 million to get an initiative qualified for the ballot. Now that's not for ordinary citizens to really assert their rights. There's another way to do it, and that is, of course, a way that I added to this process. And now, with this process, you can now use electronic signatures, which means that you can now do this very cheaply rather than the way you do it in the 24 states. You could do it very, very cheaply. You could do it through the internet. So now you could set up a percentage, and we leave the percentages open, because at the federal level and at the state level and the local level, you'll have different percentages because you're dealing with different population sizes. And so if it's a large city like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, that's one percentage. If you're dealing with a small community of 8,000, like Wasilla, Alaska, 6,000 people, you can have a different percentage. So let's leave that up to the judgment of the electoral trust. And that's, of course, why you elect these people, to have it fairly determined by people who have judgment and want to make sure that it is fair for that. So that's a policy question, and that's why you have these elected people. So they will make a judgment of what percentage, but it'll still be very easy because you'll be able to do this on the internet with electronic signatures. But another way to do it, which is one of the ways I like it, particularly federally, and that is you'll be able to take a federal poll. You can take a federal poll for about $25,000, $30,000. And so if 50% of the people, and here too that's a determination made by the electoral trust, if 50% of the American people in a poll feel that this should be voted upon, then it's qualified. And that's a fair process. And then, of course, the last is the legislative resolution. If the legislative body of relevant jurisdiction, the Congress, the state legislature, or the city council, vote by resolution that the initiative in question should be put before the electorate without changing a word, then it's qualified. So those three ways are how a legislative, how an initiative is qualified. That's it. So now, the cost of qualifying is paid for by those who are the sponsors of an initiative. From that point forward, you need not spend a penny more in support of your initiative. The rest of the process is covered by the public monies of the initiative process. That is very significant to the democratic process in question. And let me repeat, this is very, very important. The people who sponsor an initiative can contact the Electoral Trust and receive assistance in the drafting of an initiative. Then they go out and get it qualified by any one of these three methods: by citizen petition, by a public poll, and by legislative resolution. And they pay for this process. But after they get it qualified, the sponsors do not have to pay for any more of the initiative process. That is all paid for by the legislative trust, which is funded. Its activities are funded by the public, by taxpayer dollars, because that is the initiative process. Just like the Congress. The legislative process of the Congress is paid for by taxpayer dollars.